Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. Mordecai, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai. Let me first start by saying thank you all. I think thus far we're into 3 episodes with many more on the horizon, and I have been so appreciative, honored by the messages on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram that you all have shared, just of appreciation, lessons that you've learned thus far, and the guests that we've had on this show. And that's the spirit of this project, and that is encouraging you to discover your mission, to reimagine your why, to find rejuvenation, and the amazing work that you're doing to advance your respective communities. Today's guest is an individual, an educator, a leader that I first came in contact with, I recall, on LinkedIn. And from there, we've become good friends. He's someone who I really appreciate, have a deep appreciation and fondness for his commitment to social and economic mobility and equitable student success. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Greg Hodges, president of Patrick and Henry Community College in Martinsville, Virginia. A product of Patrick and Henry Community College more than 25 years ago. He is someone who has worked his way through the ranks, first starting as an adjunct and then holding various roles at the college, the community college. He even married, literally as you're here, the girl next door who he was raised next door to. It's an amazing story, but he talks about the relentlessness that we must have in the community college space and as educators to truly transform the lives of the students we serve. You're going to enjoy today's interview. Now it's time for my interview with Dr. Gregory Hodges. Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. Mordecai here for Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai, and I'm here with an educator that just inspires me, an amazing individual, someone who is passionate about the transformation of the lives of others. I'm here with Dr. Greg Hodges of Patrick and Henry Community College in Martinsville, Virginia. How are you doing, Dr. Hodges?
I am wonderful, Mr. President. Thank you so much for inviting me to serve on or to be a guest on your podcast. I'm a fan of yours, and so I am delighted to be able to be a guest on your show, sir.
Well, brother, I will tell you, we inspire one another. Let's jump right into it. You are a product of Martinsville, Virginia, so you're able to serve where in a community that served you, that was a part of your upbringing and essentially raised you. Tell us a little bit about this amazing story that you're able to serve the community that raised you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was born and raised in this community. It's a very rural community in Southern Virginia. And in fact, true story, I married the literal girl next door. The girl that grew up beside me, I married. And we went away for a while I completed my undergraduate education at William & Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, moved back to this community. I was a public school teacher for 12 years and actually started my relationship with Patrick and Henry Community College as a student here. So it is my great pleasure now, frankly, to serve a college where I was once a student and a community that helped produce the educational attainments that I was able to achieve. I am very fortunate to serve in a community that I absolutely love and cherish and that raised me. Our community has gone through rapid transformation in the last 2 decades. I'm sure we'll talk about it. And to be on the other side of that now and be able to helm an institution that is committed to the economic mobility of this community is my great honor.
You just said one of my passion terms there, economic mobility. Tell us a little bit, where does that focus come from? You know, social economic mobility is definitely terms that are beginning to become a part of the conversation in many spaces around the country. And so tell us, what does that mean for you all? What are the kind of changes, the evaluations, the assessments you all are having to do in order to achieve such economic mobility in your community?
Sure. So if you'll indulge me, I'll give you a 30-second history of this community. When I grew up here in the 80s and early 90s, we were an economic powerhouse. Even though we're small and relatively rural, we were the sweatshirt capital of the world and the furniture capital of America. Textile was king in this community, and furniture was queen. In the early part of the 90s, we held the moniker for the most millionaires per capita of anywhere in America. Now, we're a small community, but per capita, it was significant. Large major corporations held their international headquarters here in both textile and furniture. Late 90s, early 2000s, outsourcing and international trade changed all of that. And as happened in many communities in America, our community went through an economic period of devastation. And we went from the textile and sweatshirt capital of the world to the unemployment capital of Virginia.
Wow.
In a period of 3 years, we lost 20,000 jobs in our very small community. Unemployment capped at 25% and stayed above 15% for a decade. Again, this is a picture that has been painted in many small communities across rural America. It took some time, frankly, for us to redefine ourselves and to figure out what was next. We held on to the idea that the jobs that left and went overseas were coming back, and after about 10 years, the local leaders realized that was not the case. And in the last 6 years, we've gone through a real economic renaissance in this community, where we are now focused squarely on advanced manufacturing. And in the last 2 years, we have recruited several international companies back into our community and are seeing jobs exploding. And it is candidly the mission of my college and of myself to connect our students with these jobs. We have one job at Patrick and Henry Community College, and it is lifting students and their families out of poverty and keeping students and their families out of poverty. And we have one way to do that, and that's connecting them with good paying jobs with family sustaining wages. So our community, and now this community college, we're the only higher ed institution in this service region, has one focus. It's jobs. I tell folks all the time, whether students are with us 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, they are here to get a JOB degree. That's the degree they're interested in, and our job is to get them connected to that degree.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure if you're watching this, as you're watching this, you can just hear the passion in President Hodges' voice, and I love it. It always energizes me. For someone who's watching this, someone who desires to serve at your level, President Hodges, one day, or just be more effective in their service to their communities as educators, a part of this renaissance that you spoke of that's taking place in your community, how did you ensure under your leadership that Patrick and Henry was at the table? Because as we see in many different spaces, sometimes industry is having those conversations and education is not at that table. Talk to us about what you've done to ensure that Patrick and Henry is at the table.
That's such a good question, and I will give credit where credit is due. My predecessor, who was in this chair for 9 years prior to me, has to receive most of the credit for getting us to the table. She came, candidly, as our community was at the absolute depths of our economic depression. And she recognized, because she had an economic development background, that one of the keys to rescuing this community was getting the college front and center of our economic development wheel. So now, 10 years later, she positioned us, and I was able to take that mantle that she created, and now for 2 years, make sure that we are positioning ourselves squarely in the center of the economic development wheel. Candidly, a decade ago, President Brownlee, there was no economic development cooperation on my campus with the local EDC partners. Now, there's not a pitch that happens that doesn't begin or end on my campus. We are the cog of the economic development wheel. That means a lot for us, but it also means that we have to have the faculty, we have to have the facilities, we have to have the programs that the business and industries are coming to us saying that they need. And I say that very clearly. We don't tell them what they need. They tell us what we need, and we have to figure out how to produce it and procure the resources to make it happen. We are I talk often about how different our community is from 10 years ago, but our college is also very different than what it was 10 years ago. We now have that single focus, economic development and economic mobility, and those two go hand in hand. Let me say one other quick thing, if I may.
Yeah,
this economic renaissance is real for us, but all populations are not experiencing it evenly. And one of our missions is to make sure that we never lose sight of connecting all populations, whether it's first generation, low income, students of color, ESL students, English as a second language students, and making sure that they have those same opportunities to connect to these high paying jobs and get their families out of poverty as well.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Greg. Talk to me about the culture. So this responsiveness that you're now speaking of that Patrick and Henry has, it sounds like it's ingrained in the culture, the needs of industry, the needs of the community, economic mobility. Talk to us about how is one who's seeking to, again, increase their effectiveness in their various roles and service. What was it that you brought to the table that you can share in terms of wisdom with someone on today about how to increase that urgency, how to shift that culture or nurture a more responsive culture, because it's certainly needed now more than ever?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the most important lesson that I've ever learned to that extent, President Brownlee, is to understand your own personal why. Knowing why you do this work. When my dad dropped and my mother dropped me off at the College of William and Mary for my 4-year degree, my dad, who is just a jokester from the word go, but he grabbed me, hugged me, told me how proud he was, and he said, if you're coming here to discover yourself, it better be a short trip, and I'm not paying for it. The reality is our students don't have the time to spin or to candidly swirl as we've seen happen so often. So coming to this with your own personal why, and for me that is economic mobility. I'm in my mind and in my college's mind, I think they recognize that economic mobility is why we do what we do. And then once you've got that why, everything else begins to take shape. Our college board just passed our new strategic plan, and it's got a singular goal, and it is to close equity gaps in 3 areas: socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, and gender. But it's tied to the why. Why are we closing the gaps? It is not just to get a credential, it's not just to get a degree, but it's to get a job that leads to high-paying, family-sustaining wages. We used to determine 10 years ago success at many community colleges was how many people are coming the front door, because we were funded on FTE. And then we transitioned to how many people are graduating. Well, ultimately, that's really not the end game either. It is how many people are getting employed, whether it's in 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, with good paying jobs with family sustaining wages. We cite that over and over because that's our why. That's why we do what we do. I'm 100% convinced that students don't come to us. We talk about the language of degrees and credentials, and we talk about an industry-recognized credential, an IRC, or career study certificate, or an associate's degree. That's our language. They're coming to us to get a job or to get a better job and to provide for their families, and we get to make that happen. It is the ultimate gift, candidly, that we get to do that work every day.
Share with us, President Hodges, where does this passion come from? You've kind of let us into a glimpse a bit of this, but just share with us, where does this passion come from? You talked about your why, which I think is critical, and I'm certainly going to highlight this as one of my key takeaways from this video and this interview. But just share with us, where does this passion come from? Was it birth in you? Where was the influences that drive you and help you discover your why along your own journey?
I appreciate you asking that, President Brownlee. Actually, it is very personal for me, as it is, I think, for most leaders when they're own wise. But my dad is the next to youngest of 21 children who grew up on a farm here in Henry County, Virginia. He, like everyone else in his family, had to quit school early on because they had to go to work and they had to get busy on the farm. He was able to get his GED through military service and even went on to take some college classes. When I made the transition from elementary ed school teacher to an adjunct faculty member teaching education here at Patrick and Henry, my dad sat me down, and he and my mother was still alive then. They both looked at me. My mother grew up in the coal fields of West Virginia, and both of them sat down and looked at me and said, we were thrilled when you went to William and Mary. We were thrilled when you went to teach 3rd grade, but we could not be more proud of you now because you're in the community college world. And my dad looked at me and said, now you're teaching people like me. Now you're helping people like me. And it is one of those things that you just never forget, that when your father looks at you and said, I didn't have these opportunities, and now you're providing them for other people, it jazzes me every day to do this work.
I would imagine, thank you for sharing that. I would imagine that there are the good days, there's the bad days, or maybe you won't even frame them as bad days, maybe the more challenging days. What do you do? How do you feed your soul, as I like to say? How do you feed your soul on a daily basis to continue to do this work?
Yeah, man, what a good question. A couple of things. First of all, I'm a person of deep faith, and my faith guides every step of my journey. And I recognize that for me, it is about how many families am I connecting with a good life. And that sounds very broad and very big and very bold and aspirational, and I mean it to be. I have some pictures, you can't see them, but I have pictures all around here, families that my college has touched. Right behind me, I have some mementos of international students who would have never gotten the opportunity for a better life were it not for Patrick and Henry Community College. And those are daily reminders to me that the work we do matters. Not just, we all get tied up in the macro of what is our average wage and how many jobs are we producing and how many graduates are we producing, but each one of those numbers is a life, and each life is a family. And the health of my community is contingent upon the educational attainment of my students, because we are the only educational provider, higher educational provider in my community. That's a long answer to your wonderful question, but for me, it is truly about how many students and families are we getting above that line so that they can live a life that they are created to live, frankly.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We're turning the corner here. We've got one more lap in. I'm going to do my best to get as many questions I can in respect of your time, President. Let me ask this question, and that is, what are some of the lessons, maybe some of the tips that as you've went along your journey thus far that you can maybe share with the viewers and the listeners on today to say, you know what, I wish someone would have shared these tips, or these have been some of the more impactful lessons that you've learned serving at the helm of Patrick and Henry Community College?
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, we can't do this work in isolation. The partners that we bring to the table are absolutely essential. And when I say partners, I mean everything from the economic development coordinator works. I'm talking about faith-based partners, our K-12 partners, our university transfer partners. For us, it's outside of our service region, but we still have a robust university transfer partnerships across Virginia. It is cultivating those relationships on an everyday basis and realizing that the work that we're doing is transformative, but it's not in isolation. And then bringing that same mentality, I think, onto the campus. It is very easy in our world to get lost in the silos of what we do, but we cannot do this work without the partnerships. We are really, I think, as leaders in that silo-busting business and helping our deans, our directors, our mid-level managers, and then the cabinet understand why we do the work and why we bring it to the table and the partnerships behind it. That's number one. Number two, and again, I may sound like a broken record, discovering your own personal why, and why this jazzes you and why this engages you so much and why you do this work. And then number three, keeping the product in mind. What is the end goal? What is it you're striving for? Is it just the numbers is the goal to increase enrollment this year? Is the goal to increase graduates this year? Or is the goal to increase economic mobility? Because those are three very different things. I often remind our faculty and our staff and even our community that a credential that keeps someone in poverty is of no value to them or us. And in fact, we've done them no favors by getting them a credential that keeps them in poverty. Let's connect them to credentials that lead to economic gains. For example, I just had one of our brand new employers on our campus last week who's bringing 900 jobs to our rural community, which is huge. And the HR team was here telling our associate's degree graduates that they're prepared to offer them starting salaries of $75,000, which is, man, that's life changing. That rebuilds the fabric of our community. So that's keeping that in mind while you do the work is an important lesson, I think.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We can keep going on for a while, but you know what? We've got one more question for you on today, and that is as you all know, and the watchers, the listeners are catching on now, discovering your mission with Dr. Mordecai. One of the last questions that we love to wrap up with is asking our guests about their personal mission statement. You've heard so much already from President Hodges on today about his why, but here's the opportunity that we have to hear directly from President Dr. Greg Hodges on what is your mission, sir, and share with us why that is your mission.
Sure, sure. It is candidly evolved as I have risen in leadership. I started out here as an adjunct student way back when, adjunct faculty, faculty assistant dean, dean, 2 VPs, and then president. And that has evolved to where it is now. And where it is now is, for me, very crisp and very clean. How many students and how many families are we lifting out of poverty and keeping out of poverty? Because if you look at the college's mission statement, it's about the economic vibrancy and the mobility of the community. But for us personally, it's about those families and those individual students. So my personal mission statement is I get out of bed every day to lift families out of poverty and to keep families out of poverty. And our way of doing that is connecting them with good paying jobs. So that's why we do the economic development. That's why we do the partnership. That's why we do all of it, to get them into good paying jobs where they can provide for their families.
Dr. Greg Hodges, everyone, you are an absolute jewel. You are passionate. You are an amazing, effective, and inspirational educator. Thank you so much for your time on today, Dr. Hodges. We appreciate it.
President Brownlee, it's been my pleasure. And look, you are a rock star among rock stars in this community college world. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your leadership on AACC and how you're representing all of us. But more importantly, thank you for the passion and joy you're bringing to this work. We are all basking in the work that you're doing, sir. We're very grateful.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care, my friend.
Once again, President Hodges, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom shared. As you all know by watching the show by now, at this point, I'd like to highlight 3 takeaways that I personally are going to call out to share with you that were really impactful for me. However, I encourage you to choose and identify your own key takeaways that's going to support your journey. But here are my 3. Number 1, Dr. Hodges said, never lose sight of connecting all communities. He talked about the various identities of our students, whether it be first generation, whether it be students of color, whether it be a working adult, wherever the identity of that student is, we must serve and connect all communities. I thought that was pretty powerful. Secondly, he said, you must understand your own personal why. We talk about this on the show in terms of discovering your mission, but you have to know and understand your why, what it is that you're doing, your purpose, and how every day you're showing up to live out that purpose. Thought that was powerful. Last, certainly not least, Dr. Hodges talked about we can't do this work in isolation. I think now more than ever, as we talk about increased calls for efficiency and effectiveness, we have to think about how these silos were first designed and built. Was it due to a lack of trust? Calling that out, discovering that, and then eradicating the barriers and challenges and silos that will prevent us from transforming the lives of our students and certainly our community. I wish you all the absolute best. I can't wait to see you. Until next time, I'll see you at itsdrmordecai.com. Take care, everybody. Be well.